Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The morning air was crisp, heavy with the metallic scent of rain on the still damp asphalt. In the city's narrow streets, the calm seemed superficial, almost deceptive. Captain Jackson, a police officer for over 15 years, drove his patrol car with the arrogant self-assurance that had earned him his reputation, and his enemies. He had always judged people before even knowing them, and his hatred for black people was no secret. That day, Jackson was in a particularly foul mood. A minor argument at a coffee shop had set him off, and he was looking for a reason to put someone in their place. When he saw a black man walking calmly and confidently down the sidewalk, something inside him ignited. Without thinking, he slammed on the brakes and got out of his car, his face contorted with anger and contempt. "Hey you! Stop," he yelled, his voice echoing off the building facades. The man turned slowly, without the slightest panic. Jackson, convinced of his right, suddenly struck him, throwing him against the wall of an alley. Passers-by stepped back, shocked by this gratuitous violence. But as Jackson prepared to strike again, he felt an icy chill run down his spine. The black man on the ground rose with a disconcerting dignity. His piercing eyes fixed on Jackson with glacial intensity. Slowly, in a firm but measured voice, he said, "Captain Jackson. I am General Marcus Thompson." The world seemed to reel around Jackson. His anger and arrogance crumbled instantly. He had just attacked one of the most respected officers in the U.S. Army, a man whose name alone could destroy careers and ruin lives. The murmur of passers-by turned to a heavy silence, each understanding that Jackson had just made an irreparable mistake. His fist, still suspended in the air, trembled. Shame and fear seeped into his mind like poison. Everything he had built, all his illusions of power, had just crumbled in an instant. And as Thompson advanced slowly toward him, calm and implacable, Jackson understood that karma had struck, and that nothing, now, could stop it. After the shock of the prologue, the street seemed suspended in time. Passers-by held their breath as General Marcus Thompson, ever calm, approached Jackson. Each step he took resonated like a drumbeat, imposing and authoritative. Jackson, who had never faced anyone capable of silencing him, felt his heart pound in his chest. "Captain Jackson," said Thompson, his voice deep and controlled, "you know exactly what you just did." Jackson tried to reply, but no words came out. His mouth was dry, his usually so natural arrogance had vanished. He looked around. Witnesses were already filming with their phones, some were whispering, others were backing away in fear of the impending confrontation. "You just struck a senior officer, an army general, for no reason, no valid cause." Thompson advanced slowly, but every movement he made exuded undeniable power. Jackson felt a dull panic creeping over him. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the one in control. As Jackson prepared to stammer out an apology, Thompson slowly raised his hand and placed a finger on his shoulder, a calm but penetrating gesture. "I could arrest you right here. You know what that would mean for your career, your life." Jackson swallowed hard. The world around him seemed to crumble. He had believed that his position as a police officer would allow him to dominate anyone. But faced with Thompson, all that arrogance seemed ridiculous, almost pathetic. The general continued, "But today you will learn a lesson. Not just about respect, but about the cost of judging someone before knowing their identity." At that precise moment, Jackson realized that his actions had triggered something far beyond his control. Karma had struck, and there was no escape. Thompson was looking him straight in the eye, and Jackson knew that his career, his honor, and even his ego would pay the price. Then, calmly, Thompson turned and said, "We'll sort this out, but you'll need to understand the implications of your actions." The witnesses filmed every move, every word. Jackson felt that this day would change his life forever. The days following the incident were a nightmare for Captain Jackson. Every movement, every glance around him reminded him of his shame. The story of his senseless violence had spread throughout the city thanks to videos taken by bystanders. Social media was ablaze. Hashtags denouncing his racist behavior circulated everywhere, accompanied by comments from outraged citizens. For the first time, Jackson could no longer hide his guilt behind his uniform or his badge. Meanwhile, General Marcus Thompson had not backed down an inch. He had contacted higher authorities to report the assault and demanded an impartial investigation. His authority and powerful name compelled a swift response. Jackson was immediately suspended from his duties, and his case was thoroughly reviewed. The racist police officer found himself alone, publicly humiliated. Even his colleagues, formerly silent accomplices to his prejudices, turned their backs on him. Every morning, when he passed by the neighborhood he had once arrogantly patrolled, the residents' stares were heavy with judgment. The hatred he had sown returned with full force, with no possibility of escape. Thompson, for his part, wasn't just seeking punishment. He wanted to turn this incident into a lesson. He invited Jackson to a private meeting in the general's office. The room was spacious, decorated simply but imbued with authority. Thompson stood behind his desk, calm and motionless, while Jackson sat in a rigid chair, his heart pounding, his face red with shame. "Captain Jackson," Thompson began, his voice firm but controlled, "you thought you could humiliate someone you didn't know, because you let your prejudices guide you. But your actions have consequences. Lives can be shattered by a single impulse, and sometimes, those lives can change the course of your existence." Jackson dared not reply. Every word from the general resonated like a thunderclap. Fear and regret mingled in his mind. He understood that he could never undo what he had done. "You will undergo a full internal investigation. Your colleagues, your superiors, everyone will know what you did. And believe me," Thompson continued, staring intently at him, "I will make sure this lesson is memorable. Not out of revenge, but so that you understand the price of hatred." Jackson lowered his head, unable to meet the gaze of the man he had thought he could intimidate. General Thompson, calm and majestic, had just taken complete control of the situation. And for Jackson, it was the beginning of an inevitable descent into humiliation, loss of power, and perhaps a complete questioning of his own identity. Jackson's case didn't remain confined to the police station. Local and national media quickly picked up the video of the assault, and the captain found himself at the center of a public scandal. Newspapers displayed his name in capital letters: "Racist Captain Assaults a Black General." Social media, for its part, offered no respite: memes, indignant comments, videos summarizing the incident. Jackson had become the living symbol of police arrogance and racism. Every day at the precinct was hell. His colleagues averted their eyes, some making sarcastic remarks about his behavior. Even his superiors, who had once turned a blind eye to his excesses, were now cold and distant. Captain Jackson, used to intimidating others, was experiencing fear and humiliation for the first time. But Thompson hadn't finished his lesson. He organized a public meeting as part of a conference on respect and military discipline. The invitation, seemingly formal and innocuous, surprised Jackson when he received the official letter. The captain, still naively hoping things would calm down, agreed to attend. On the day of the conference, the room was packed: journalists, military personnel, civilians, and students. Thompson took the floor, and at one point, he mentioned the incident with Jackson, without ever naming the police officer directly. But the look Thompson gave Jackson was enough to make the captain blush. The words were precise. "Every action has consequences. A single moment of hatred can ruin lives and destroy careers." Jackson felt his blood run cold. The murmurs in the room pointed at him unambiguously. His past as an arrogant racist had just come crashing back into his face, and he understood that his reputation was irreparably tarnished. After this public humiliation, Jackson returned home alone. The solitude weighed heavily on him. For the first time, he truly reflected on his actions, his prejudices, his violence, his gratuitous hatred. Every memory of his past aggressions now seemed grotesque, absurd. The man he had struck, Marcus Thompson, embodied everything he was not: dignity, power, and respect. Jackson understood that the general was not merely a superior officer or a military symbol, but a mirror reflecting his own weaknesses. That night, in his silent house, Jackson looked at himself in the mirror. The image that reflected his arrogance and hatred seemed alien to him. For the first time, he felt a deep regret awaken within him, a mixture of fear, shame, and a desire for redemption. But could he really change? And above all, would Thompson give him a chance to redeem himself, or was this the end of his career and his pride? Captain Jackson would soon discover that some lessons, when imposed by fate and by those we have underestimated, are unforgettable. A few weeks after Jackson's public humiliation and suspension, the captain was summoned for a formal disciplinary hearing. The room was imposing, cold, with long wooden benches and an atmosphere heavy with gravity. Thompson was present, seated in the front row, his piercing gaze following Jackson's every move. The captain stepped forward, his back stiff but his heart pounding. He had spent sleepless nights reflecting on his actions, their absurdity, and for the first time, he felt the true weight of his hatred. The internal judges, neutral officers, laid out the facts, the gratuitous attack, the blatant racism, and the public humiliation. The evidence was overwhelming: videos, witness statements, reports from colleagues. Thompson spoke, but not to condemn. His voice, firm but measured, resonated throughout the room. "Captain Jackson, you have committed an unacceptable act. But this institution believes in responsibility and in the capacity of individuals to change. You will have a chance to redeem yourself, provided you follow a strict program of self-reflection, training, and community service." Jackson lowered his head, feeling a mixture of humiliation and gratitude. He understood that his only chance of redemption depended on his ability to accept his mistake and learn from a man he had thought he could intimidate. The program was intense. Jackson had to attend lectures on the history and consequences of racism, participate in military discipline workshops, and work in mentoring programs for underprivileged youth. Each day was a constant reminder of his mistake, and each interaction with those he had despised was a humbling experience. During those weeks, Thompson personally monitored Jackson's progress. He confronted him, questioned him, and pushed him to reflect on his prejudices. Jackson sometimes felt anger, shame, and even discouragement, but he was beginning to see the truth: his past arrogance could no longer exist if he wanted to rebuild his life. At the end of the program, a ceremony was held. Jackson, now transformed, stood before his superiors and the community. Thompson stepped forward and placed his hand on his shoulder, a gesture of silent recognition. "You have learned the hardest lesson. Always remember it. What defines us is not the hatred we harbor, but our ability to transform it into responsibility and respect." Jackson, his eyes moist but resolute, understood that this was not an end, but a new beginning. The road to redemption would be long, but he had just learned the most precious lesson: never again would he judge someone before knowing their identity, and never again would he underestimate the power of dignity and respect embodied by Marcus Thompson. The captain left the room, a changed man. The city, witness to his fall and now his awakening, finally seemed to breathe. And in his heart, Jackson knew that hatred, when confronted with truth and justice, always gives way to responsibility.